Hey everyone, it's White Cross, and I want to welcome you to what I hope you will find to be as exciting a video as this event has been for me for the last week and a half or so. If you are new to the channel, I appreciate you being with me here today. Hopefully you'll subscribe to the channel so you can see more of this type of video. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you guys so much for being with me here again today. It really means a lot to me to know that I'm putting out the type of videos that you're finding both informative and hopefully also entertaining. And if you're returning and you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and click on that subscribe button. So this video is some pretty exciting content if you like older silver bars. And we'll be getting to that in just a moment. But if you've been here before, you know that I like to begin each of my videos with a simple disclaimer. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer any kind of financial advice. I'm simply trying to share some of my experiences having bought and sold precious metals and rare coins for the last 30 or 40 years. And I also usually try to work in a simple concept that hopefully we can reapply as we are examining whatever the content of this particular video is. And in this case, the concept that I want to put out here is re-entry. So really simply, re-entry for this just means that we are starting to see, or I am starting to see locally at least, some pieces coming back onto the market that have been absent for quite a while. And I suspect that is due in part to both the really high price of silver recently and especially those really ridiculously high premiums on silver. If you're new to the concept of premiums, that's simply the amount that you have to pay over and above the value of the gold or silver or platinum for whatever vehicle it is that you're buying. The premium goes to cover the seller's expenses, their rent, their mortgage, their keeping their lights on, keeping their employees. Also covers that spread if they bought high and are selling to you low. So the premiums that we've seen over the last 6 months or a year have been astronomical, some of the highest that I've ever seen in the period of time that I've been doing this. And it's really kind of eye-opening when you see those premiums. I think the high price of silver, the high price of gold, and those premiums also are starting to drive some people to sell some items that have been in pretty strong hands for a while. And I'm an example of that. If you've watched some of the older videos, you know that I have exited out a few of those Hoard 10-ounce bars, the second commercial series from the late 1980s, still in their original vinyl pouches. And I also have sold bits and pieces. I had the video of orphans that I sold recently. That is pieces that don't really work with my stack anymore, pieces that I started collecting and stopped, or individual items that I picked up along the way. So I'm kind of a good example of that re-entry too. Those pieces have been sitting in my safe deposit boxes on my desk or wherever it is they've been for the last 8 or 10 years, and I have finally cycled out of those. I've rotated out of those items. Re-entry. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have seen some items reappearing recently. I know there's been a serious drought when it comes to things like silver eagles. And for the longest time, I saw odds and ends of pieces that are trying to kind of compete with those eagles. But all of a sudden, I've started to see in the last literally 2 or 3 weeks, some pieces that have been gone for a long time on the silver market coming back. Rolls of silver eagles, rolls of silver maples, some of the most common and arguably some of the most desirable pieces that modern collectors usually go for, modern stackers usually go for. They have been absent for a while. I have started to see them coming back on the market. Let me know if you are too, if you're seeing it locally. I've noticed some indication of it nationally as well. So let me know if you are seeing that re-entry. And the subject that we're going to be talking about today deals a little bit with that. So let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video, why you are here and why I'm so excited with this journey and to share it with you. So if you do follow the channel, you saw the video that I put out a couple weeks back, probably not even that long ago, that I called Three Little Birds. And that was one of my local dealers that I deal with periodically contacted me. Actually, I just visited the shop and they had 3 old poured 1970s, early 1980s 10-ounce class silver bars. Now, if you are a fan of the older 999 silver bars from the 60s and 70s, you know that those types of old poured bars don't appear on the market very often. I do this on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis. Honestly, most of the time I'm trying to hustle on a daily basis, and I see these old poured bars very, very infrequently. So when I stopped by a local dealer and they had 3 of them, it didn't take me very long to snap them up. And I'll put a link to that video down below so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. But those 3 bars were a Star Metals bar, a Hoffman Hoffman bar, and a Western States Refinery. Now, I mentioned in that video that I had actually had a Star Metals bar before, many years ago, passed through my stack for one reason or another. I don't have it any longer, but I'd never had a Hoffman Hoffman, and I'd never had a Western States Refinery. Those are pretty desirable bars. Those are some pretty interesting pieces that most people that stack the older pieces, the older silver bullion, would be excited to have in their stack. So I took the opportunity and I snagged all 3 of those bars. And like I said, I'll put a link to that video down below. But what I didn't know, and what my dealer didn't know, is the crux of this video. And that is, a few days after those bars appeared at that local dealer, the seller, who was the heirs of an estate, brought in the rest of the collection. Now, like I said, these types of bars appear very infrequently. If you are a mover and shaker and you are in the weeds when it comes to buying and selling, you might see 2 or 3 of these types of bars a year. You know, it's a very rare thing to see more than 1 or 2 at a time. So when my dealer contacted me and said that the heirs to this estate had brought in the rest of the collection, you can imagine just how excited I was. Now, my dealer had no idea that there was a rest of the collection, and I certainly had no idea that there was a rest of the collection. That's how scarce these types of bars are. You think 3 is probably a sufficient amount to constitute a stack for somebody who had stacked in the early 1990s, and that's apparently when this individual had been aggressively buying these bars. And interestingly, he only acquired bars made by 4 or 5 or maybe 6 smelters, refineries. He was only interested in those pieces. So this was somebody who was stacking but was also clearly collecting in a period of time that most people weren't really doing that. So I hopped in my car and I drove over to meet my dealer, and unfortunately I got there right before they closed for the evening. But these bars were exceptional, and it was mind-blowing to see the quantity. So the dealer was kind enough to say that I could have overnight to think about it, and I went home and I put my brain on overdrive. Now, I suffer from a lot of afflictions, but one of the afflictions that I've suffered from my entire life is the ability to focus on one item to the exclusion of just about everything. So I had a very sleepless night as I was doing the mental gymnastics, considering the pros and cons of an acquisition of this scale. This was massive, and it also required a lot of moving parts come together very quickly. So I did all of the homework that I possibly could. I laid out all the pros and cons and thought about them as hard as I could. And in the end, I really came to a conclusion using, in some part, Tom's Law. And we've talked about Tom's Law before, and that is simply, if you've been doing this kind of thing for a long time and you come across something that you have never seen before, it could be that length of time before you ever see that item again, if you ever do. So it might be time to act. And we've talked about Tom's Law before. And this is one of those instances when I felt like it was really appropriate. So I came to the conclusion that I should probably pursue this hoard that I have nicknamed the Lydian Hoard, Lydia, the kingdom where the first coins were created in 600 BC, because that's the depth of these items that were so interesting to me. So I decided that the most logical thing for me to do would be to go forward with an acquisition. But in order to really feel like I was in the driver's seat when it came to the amount of money that this was going to cost and the impact that it was going to have on my own personal physical precious metals collection, stack, holdings, whatever you want to call it, the most logical thing for me to do would be to rotate out of some of my other items. Now, I said in the 100-ounce video for 999 Silver Bar Collectors that I had a group of these Johnson Matthey extruded portrait-style 100-ounce silver bars from the late 1980s in their original boxes. And I also mentioned that they were kind of a cornerstone of my physical precious metals holding, and I had no interest in selling them. But when push came to shove in the 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning period of time when I was pondering what to do about this, I came to the conclusion that having these pieces, no matter how important they were to me as kind of the cornerstone of my physical precious metal stack, they were redundant. I had several of these, and while they are a very cool bar and I like them a lot, and there is a little bit of a sentimental attachment to them, I think I mentioned before that I had picked up most of these from my main dealer who passed away many years ago. And my records indicate that at the time I was paying $1,700 a piece for these. So I was buying these when silver was somewhere in that $15, $16 an ounce range. In order to acquire this hoard and to bring my price down, I needed to rotate out of something like this and put those funds towards the purchase of this hoard. Now, I want to be very clear about that. This bar didn't come anywhere near to paying off the amount of money that was involved here. That's the amount of money we're talking about. But by doing this, I felt like I had a handle on the situation and I could direct some funds from some other sources in order to cover the entire hoard. So, do I have your interest? I did sell this bar. In fact, I sold a bar that was identical to this one, and it is already shipped off to the new owner. I got a great price for it. They got a great price for it. I think we're both very, very happy. And as I said before, it was redundant. I had several of these, and it wasn't as interesting as the bars included in the Lydian Hoard. And that's what ultimately drove me to sell this bar, or one identical to it, in order to acquire the hoard. Now, before I do any kind of big reveal, I just want to spell out a couple things so there's no confusion here. I'm not really interested in selling this hoard. I'm not looking for buyers. I appreciate if you guys think that it's an amazing hoard like I do, but that's not the purpose of this. I'm sharing it with you because it brings in so many concepts that we've talked about over the last few months, from a maturing hoard, a maturing stack, and cycling out of pieces, that rotation that we've talked about many, many times. At what point do you use Tom's Law? So many of the concepts that we've been talking about over the last several months and weeks really came into play, and I wanted to show you how a real-life situation like this unfolds and how it turned out. So without any further ado, let me introduce to you at least a very small amount of the Lydian Hoard. And I'll just do the unveiling here. So there we go. As I said, this isn't even close to everything that was included in this hoard. The hoard is over 36 of these bars. And the most part of these bars are 10-ounce class. Late 1970s, early 1980s silver bars. We use the term class because these bars were done individually, and the amount of metal that was poured into the mold varied from piece to piece. So while they were aiming for 10 ounces or 20 ounces or 5 ounces, as some of the examples you see down below, they usually weren't very precise. In fact, they rarely got it spot on. So they would weigh the bars individually and then stamp the weights into those individual bars. So what you see here is a selection of those star metal bars. Remember that first group of 3 that I bought had one of those, and how exceptional it is to come across something like that over the course of the year. There were nearly a dozen of these star refinery bars. The next ones we see here are these Hoffman Hoffman bars, and you'll remember that there was a Hoffman Hoffman included in that group of 3 original pieces as well. Hoffman Hoffman, allenglehart.com estimates in this 10-ounce class that there are probably fewer than 1,500 of these bars, and I can tell you that there were well over half a dozen of these bars included in this Lydian Hoard. Next up is the Western States Refinery. You might recall that was also one of those 3 original bars. A little bit difficult to get that logo in there, that WSR. Western States Refinery, 10-ounce class, they estimate, All Englehart estimates that there are fewer than 2,000 of these bars. Founded in 1975 in Fontana, California, they were only active till about 1983. So there aren't very many of these bars out there either, and They are considered to be kind of a favorite of the people that collect these types of bars. VintagePouredBar.com says, quote, there's quite a following among vintage collectors for those bars. So those were the three bars that you saw in the original video. But unbeknownst to me and also to the dealer that handled this sale originally, there was also a selection of a few other bars. So the ones that you see here front and center are some of the most interesting one, I think. This is from a company called International Vaults Refining, and they were founded in late 1977, and they went bankrupt in 1980. So they were only active for literally 20 or 30 months. I mean, we're talking about 2.5 years. They eventually defrauded their investors out of millions of dollars and then hit the trail and tried to disappear. So there are very few of these bars. International Vaults Refining. Vintage Poured Bars says, quote, they are incredibly scarce and very sought after. And All Engelhard says that there are fewer than 500 of these in existence. And I can tell you that this was the most prominent bar in this estate. So there are about a dozen of these bars included in the estate, including the 10-ounce class and also these very scarce 5-ounce class bars. I love these 5-ounce bars. Look how tight and tiny that is. Interesting that this one is actually stamped with the weight upside down relative to the logo of the company, which is on the side of the bar for these very small bars. AllEngelhard.com says that for these 5-ounce class, there are something like 1,000 in existence. So this is a quite scarce bar as well. What else do we have? J&J Smelting. Now, this is a little bit more of a more common bar. There are more examples of these out here than probably anything else in the collection. Hesperia, California, they're only about 30 miles north of Western States Refinery, so they're right there in that same central California district. And they were founded sometime in the 1970s. These bars are bringing about $500 a piece when you can find them on eBay. And interestingly, they have this counter mark, that SC that you see there. That doesn't appear on all of these bars, and the experts in this field, which I am trying as quickly as I can to become, but I am far from being one. Experts say they're not quite sure what that SC means. It doesn't appear on all of the J&J Smelting bars, so we think it's a counter mark. And that counter mark is kind of like that Makata and Goldschmidt mark that you saw on the 50-ounce Sheffield bar. If you want to go back and look at the 999 silver bars for advanced collectors, the 50-ounce class, there's that great big Makata and Goldschmidt mark on that Sheffield bar. Last one I wanted to talk about, something that is incredibly scarce, and this is unfortunately the only example that was included in this hoard, but this is an American credit bar. And there are so few of these bars, it's almost impossible to get any kind of a gauge for what they're currently trading for online. But I note that there is one on eBay right now for nearly $700. Interestingly, this little Baltrhop and Company logo down here, we feel that's also probably a countermark, like that SC on the J&J Smelting bar. There are very few of these bars to begin with, but there are fewer still that have that Baltrhop and Company mark down at the bottom. So what is this bar worth? Without knowing, without having any gauge of what the market is right now, it's anybody's guess. Were it to go up for auction, maybe $800, maybe $1,000. It's really difficult to say, but just to give you an idea of what we're talking about for the scarcity of these types of bars. So there you go. Like I said, if you are in the weeds, if you're in the thick of this kind of thing, and you keep your eyes open for these kinds of bars, unless you're going to a major coin show or major bullion type event, these bars don't come up for sale very often. So to come up with a hoard that was assembled somewhere around 30 years ago that consists of more than 36 of these bars is truly exceptional. I've never heard anything else that even kind of gets close to it, that some of you super advanced collectors who specialize in this field, and again, I appreciate the work that you're doing to kind of catalog these bars and to come up with a little bit more of a population count of them. You may see this from time to time, but I have a feeling that even people that really go after these older bars have never seen a hoard like this. And I did acquire it. So this is now part of my permanent silver precious metals holdings. I don't have any plans to break it up at this point. I don't have any plans to try to sell it all as one group. For the time being, I have been busy cataloging this collection on an Excel file. So I'm recording the maker, the stated weight. I'm measuring the actual weight with my digital scales. I'm measuring the actual purity with the sigma set at 9999 purity, so I can see where these pieces land. And surprisingly, they are all rock solid right in the middle. Down the line, the weights may be off by a tiny little bit of weight from bar to bar, but interestingly, the bars that are off just a little bit can either be down a little bit or up a little bit from where they're supposed to be. So it doesn't seem to be very much of a rhyme or reason to it. I have discovered some interesting anomalies that I'm recording, and I will get with some of the people who do specialize in these types of bars to share my findings. And I think that some of this information is primary that's never been known before. That's how exciting and interesting this collection is. And lastly, I will say that I have reached out to at least one of the top tier third-party graders in numismatics, and I have offered this hoard as an entree into them starting to slab, to encapsulate and to grade these older poured bars. You've seen me talk about that before. In fact, in one of the early 999 Advanced Bar Collectors videos, I showed an NGC graded bar, and I mentioned that PCGS has also graded some small bars in very, very particular circumstances. I think that the third-party graders grading pieces like this is long overdue, and I think it will make the hobby explode when they finally do it. So I've been in correspondence with them. They've been at least receptive to the idea. They haven't told me no yet. And I will, of course, update you if something happens with that. It's nice to know that they're at least taking this type of offer seriously. So there you go. What do you think? Is this exciting? Can you tell how excited I am about this hoard and how much fun I've been having with it? Would you have stuck your neck out to buy this type of quantity of silver bars? And, you know, even though this is north of 300 ounces, it's really not the combined weight that's impressive here. It's simply the number of these bars. Some of these bars, you can tell, have been in storage and developing this kind of beautiful tone. They haven't seen the light of day in decades. This is truly an unusual and exciting hoard. Would you have done it also? Would you have scraped together the finances to get it? Would you have rotated out of some of your other holdings to get into this? And if you did, would you try to parse it out and actually sell these items individually? Or would you do what I'm going to try to do at least, which is to try to keep this entire hoard intact, at least for the long term that I can see, the foreseeable future, as I'm working to catalog it and understand it and study these bars a little bit more. That's it. The Lydian Hoard of vintage 1970s, early 1980s 10 and 5 ounce class silver bars. Let me know your thoughts. Let me have your comments down below. If you're going to like it, tell me why you like it. Don't just give me an upvote or a downvote. Those downvotes kind of suck. Let me know your thoughts. Would you have done this? Do you find this to be as interesting as I do? Would you rather have had modern pieces? And again, there's nothing wrong with that. If you are a collector of nothing but silver for silver's sake, nothing wrong with avoiding pieces like this. I can tell you that I got these at an amazing price because I bought the entire hoard all at once, and rotating out of that Johnson Matthey 100 ounce silver bar so that I can apply that amount that I paid for silver years and years ago to this hoard, brought that price down even further to where it was incredibly affordable for me to have acquired. Leave your comments down below. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, again, I would appreciate it if you subscribe. If you've got friends online or in person who like this kind of thing, share it with them. I'd love to get the word out to them as well. I'd love to build this community a little bit more if we can. If you have any questions about these bars, leave the questions down below and I'll do my best to try to answer it if I possibly can. And you know how I end every single one of my videos. And on this time, it's a little bit special because I want to thank you for you coming with me on my journey as I go deeper into the world of physical precious metals.